When you start a new project, typically you need things like a domain name, hosting, things like that. When I choose hosting, I pick mine for the options it gives. I like to know what I'm getting and set things up just how I like them. This is why for your projects, you should check out Linode. Linode servers feature native SSD storage, a 40 gigabyte network, and Intel E5 processors. That's all the power you need to run VMs under full control, or Docker containers, who doesn't love that, encrypted disks, and VPNs. Plus, they have 10 data centers across the world and add-ons like backups, Node Balancer, and Longview to help you control your server costs. They also offer block storage for your static files, and you can get started with a $20 credit if you use the code JavaScriptJabber2018. That credit is good for 4 months on their 1 gigabyte server. That's a lot of time to try them out and see if they're the right fit for you. That code again is JavaScriptJabber2018. Also, if you're interested in working for Linode, they're hiring. Head to linode.com/careers to see their available positions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode I Have No Idea of the Adventures in Angular podcast. I'm your host, Joe Eames, and today on our panel we have Shai Reznik.
Shai Reznik. Wow, what a commercial.
Yep.
Commercial. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to go with that. Shai Reznik.
Hi, Rez.
Hi, Rez.io.
Hi, Shai Rez. Yeah, this is me. I'm Shai Reznik from the company Reznik. And I'm talking to you from a very hot place where it's raining all the time, but it's super hot. You may think I'm in Thailand, but no, it's a crazy day here in Israel. So, yeah.
And also on our panel, we have Alyssa Nicholl.
Hey, everybody. That's a great one. I like that one. I'm going to try not to be too loud to bust your eardrums.
Awesome. And then as our special guest, we have Yakov Fain.
Hello, guys. This is Yakov Fain from New York.
And so we are here today to talk about Angular and Java, a match made in heaven. But before we get started into that, Yakov, I think we want to spend a little time and just kind of get to know you. So could you give us a little bit of your background, your experience, and
okay.
All that, yeah.
Yeah, well, so I work as Java developers for at least 18 years. And during the last 4 or 5 years, I also started using front-end frameworks and Angular, of course. I was awarded with the title Java Champion many years ago. I wrote a bunch of books, many of them on Java, but some of them are on web development. And recently, like a year ago, Manning published our book, myself and my colleague, Angular Development with TypeScript, and the book was selling well. So now we did the second edition of this book, and it's about to be released by Manning. So that's about it. I do lots of trainings in Angular. I do consulting. So that's my background. I work for the company called Farata Systems.
Awesome.
So I must say, Yakov, that I'm kind of starstruck because you might not know this, but we actually met in person.
Really?
I think 7 years ago.
Really?
Where you came in to do a Flex lecture in Israel.
Oh, yeah. I was speaking on Flex some years ago, right? Agree.
Yeah. So,
but back then, you've been not that famous, I guess.
I'm still not that famous, but you were my idol in Flex, and I learned a lot from you. So first of all, thank you for all the good work you did back then.
You're welcome. Unfortunately, Flex is out of the picture, and this was one of the reasons I'm in Angular now.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, I can tell you the story of what happened with our company.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing Flex, Adobe Flex for many years, starting from 6, I believe.
6, yeah.
6, right. And it's a great framework. It still is, but it requires Flash Player as a VM. And Flash Player, as you might heard, is not that popular these days. So, I was involved with a large project. I'm still involved with it. It's like insurance app for people who sell insurance. And the front end was done in Adobe Flex. And knowing that Flash Player is going out, we started to look at the replacement. And we tried many different frameworks. Like 5 years ago, we started different frameworks in JavaScript to replace Flex. We tried AngularJS. I don't know if you will like what I say, but I didn't like it.
Get out.
Yeah, it was AngularJS. It's a different framework.
No. Let's stop the podcast. Okay.
Shai, do you know that Angular is absolutely different framework than AngularJS? Have you heard of it?
No. For me, those are the same. There can be only one.
All right. As a matter of fact, we didn't like JavaScript either, to be honest with you. Adobe Flex was using the language called ActionScript. ActionScript was actually what was supposed to be ECMAScript 4 spec, which never made it, but the language is alive and doing well. So we tried other frameworks. For example, there's a huge framework called XJS, which can do lots of things. But what we noticed, whatever JavaScript framework we pick, the productivity of our developers will drop tremendously. And we have only senior developers. We are a small company, like 35 people maybe. And we noticed the productivity drop. And finally, like 3 years ago, I started working with Angular. It was in alpha versions back then. And this combination of Angular and TypeScript finally gave us a hope, and we started working with it, and we started moving some code from Flex to Angular and TypeScript, and it works really good. I spent 3 years with this Angular 2 and above, and never regretted.
Wow, so you went through all the RC5 shenanigans back then. Wow, that must have been painful, but that's a great point that you raised. That because I keep telling people I'm also like coming from large scale projects in Flex with Java and with like different backends, and coming to JavaScript, I had the same experience. I felt like I had two sides. One was super happy that I don't have to write all that code in order to do a simple thing in JavaScript. But another side of me was, where the hell are my types? So how can I know that, what the entity that I'm getting is like, where is my dot completion? Where like all the refactoring?
That's funny that you say that. I started out learning Flex actually and ActionScript. And when I moved to JavaScript, I was like, freedom! Like it was amazing. So I can't believe you're the exact opposite.
Yeah. And ever since I kept telling people, like when I found about Angular, so Angular was pretty like the most similar framework that I saw to Flex, where with the directives, and actually I think Mishko talked about that some of the inspiration to that came from MXML and stuff like that, like for directives and stuff like that. But it also incorporated stuff from Java, like dependency injection and all that stuff. And I kept saying with the new Angular, and actually made a video about it, that it's built for large scale. Like it has all the characteristics for a large scale framework that people could work on large teams and large projects or large products, and people kept doubting that. So I'm really, really glad that we have Yakov here with lots of experience with large scale projects for a couple of years to share his experience. So what is your experience in terms of like the experience with Angular, and if you can share more details about like the scope of the projects, like how big are there, how many developers are working on that, and all that stuff.
Yeah, the project is pretty large. I don't know how many thousands lines of code is there, but a couple of 100,000 definitely. The project is being worked on since 2009. Developers, probably between 15 and 20 people work on it, so a pretty large large app. The backend is done in Java. All build tools are from the Java community. On the server side, we use Java and Spring, different databases, messaging, and everything. We use Jenkins for builds, for automated continuous integration. And frontend, as I said, we are slowly moving to Angular. And we actually use it as an opportunity not just to migrate the existing app as is, but we are rethinking different things, and it gives us a chance to create a better product. But first of all, Angular is a good fit for creating full-fledged apps, for creating a single-page app, which is great. And I will not repeat all these nice features that Angular has and tooling. So on one hand, it's great that you can build a single-page app in Angular. On the other hand, this is a weak point of Angular up till version 6. In version, I explain why. The thing is that there are reasons to use only widgets on existing websites. And this is where Angular is not that great. If you want to take an existing web page written in JavaScript or in any other framework and you want to put a widget in there written in Angular, it was difficult. And a really killer feature that I'm looking for in Angular 6 is this Angular Elements. And we already started. We want to offer, once again, our app is software service, so people can subscribe to it. But now we just started creating widgets that people can use in their existing apps. In my opinion, Angular Elements is a super killer feature for Angular, which will open lots of doors in the enterprise. Even though the doors are already wide open, based on my experience and based on what I see, based on training classes and workshop I run for really large clients. And I can tell you that it's unusually well received, Angular, in the Java community.
So
Why?
Yakov, you said unusually well received. Yeah. What would you call that as? Why would you call it unusually well received?
I can explain. Over my career, I've been teaching lots of different classes on different software. I'm not shy, and I can tell you that I'm a good trainer. So usually people like my classes, but.
Wait.
Well,
Does that mean that I'm not a good teacher?
But
that was the first thought. I was like, wait, did he just say he's not shy or like S-H? Okay, I'm with you.
Uh-huh.
I am shy with a different spelling. Shy meaning modest person. Yeah.
Okay.
To avoid confusion, let me use as injection token the word modest. Because see, we use the token shy. That's why you shouldn't inject into strings, right? Because people may have different understanding of what shy is.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm a modest person. No, I am not a modest person. And my classes usually run well. But when I teach Angular, I see that people are happy. I explain you why. The reason is, in my opinion, that Java community in general, for the last 20 years, looks down on JavaScript. Like it's not a language, it's a toy, it's ugly, and all these presentations like what?
I have definitely been told that before. I've actually been told that I'm not a real developer because I use JavaScript. So yeah.
I mean, it is so funny to hear this now that I see what's going on the front end and how big of an ecosystem it is and how much of tooling and dependencies and packages is in here. So many of Java developers still live in the last century thinking that Java is a real thing only, and JavaScript is just a toy to create nice little menus of different colors. And the other reason I think that many of Java developers in the past were trying to learn JavaScript and they didn't succeed, and they see that you can easily go in the wrong direction, and inability to see compiler's error, and as Shai said, autocomplete, and put them immediately into uncomfortable environment. So they quickly run back to Java, and they say the JavaScript is bad. But in this case, when they see the framework, which is a component-based, clean separation, classes, everybody understands what class is, every Java developer, interfaces, generics, enumerations, all that is very familiar. And clean separation between TypeScript code and HTML and CSS, everything is clean. Ability to do unit testing, ability to do end-to-end testing, excellent build tools, ability to quickly start, thanks to Angular CLI, ability to press the button and all bundles are built and optimized in no time. Start the dev server and keep working in your IDE, and everything is being recompiled. So everything is convenient. So that's why I think Java developers are happy, and they started to get a feeling that now finally they can do decent front end that can work in browser as a JavaScript without the need to write JavaScript.
Nice.
I was wondering if you've noticed that as Java developers for the first time are moving, and I know you talked about this a little bit, do they have a harder time getting to JavaScript or getting into Angular?
JavaScript. JavaScript is the main obstacle, in my opinion. And to be honest with you, I see another one. The second one is not specifically for Java developers, but for anybody who's moving from backend to front end. In my opinion, it's CSS.
Oh, yeah. Even for front end. It's
moving from front end to front end, CSS.
Yeah, there's definitely two sides of being a web developer or even a front end developer, because I've met people who are they call themselves front end developers, but they won't touch CSS. So yeah, it's very funny.
So basically, see, we are all challenged in terms of creating nice UI.
One big family.
Yeah, and especially Java developers. When we create these ugly, boring gray screen with gray buttons, and users should be happy that actually the app works. But we shouldn't forget that every user these days, even these enterprise users, they have smartphones in their pockets, like Android phones or iPhones with beautiful UI, with beautiful apps, and they are kind of spoiled. They know that things can look nicer. And learning layouts, the latest techniques, I think this is the main challenge. This is going to stay for a while. And if you are a Java developer having extra spare time, I would highly recommend you to start learning CSS, because the rest is easy. Angular is easy for Java developers, but CSS is not.
I'm just laughing because there's still parts of Angular that are too back-endy that I haven't really conquered yet, but I could just do CSS blindfolded. So it's just funny what you think is easy, because I don't know. It's so you think for most Java people though that's the case.
But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of our industry, right? Some people are more comfortable with this because of their experience, and some are more drawn to the more designs, side of things, and that's and there's so many things to learn. So everybody finds their place.
In a small app, probably CSS is not that bad, but recently I was working on a project for a large company that makes cars. And that app should look nice on different devices, of course. People should be able to purchase cars from iPhones, from Android phones, from tablets. And when something comes to adjusting CSS, it's not that straightforward. And besides that, for me, still, it's hard to find logic in there. I mean, I can definitely go to Chrome and try to play with this width and height and try to adjust it. But in many cases, to me, it's still like a miracle when it finally works.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Mhm.
So have you found that there are more like there are things that are like a specific way of teaching stuff about Angular that are more well received with Java developers? Like if I wanted to now start teach like a course for Java developers, what would work
So
better?
basically, Shai, you want to start competing with me. This is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. I'm now open.
And you expect me to give you an honest advice, right?
But
All
first
right.
off, Shai, you got to ask yourself, how shy are you?
Right.
Yeah. I'm too shy, so I might not compete because I am shy.
So I'll explain you how I go about it. I see I have two major directions in training. One of them is, as I explained, specific elements. I have a bunch of different apps. And one app describing a particular feature, like router, for example, or passing parameters in the router, or resolvers, or DI, or communication between components in a proper way. So all these things have short apps, small apps. But on the other hand, I also build an app throughout the course with attendees, with participants. And when they do this, I mean, they are pretty happy seeing how they start with nothing. I mean, they run a command like ng new, whatever app it is, and then they generate a bunch of components, and components initially they show, for example, product works, header works, footer works, and all of a sudden, slowly but surely, the app becomes live, and all of a sudden menu works, navigation works, all of a sudden data is coming from the server side and populate the screen. When we add Angular material, the app looks really nice and slick and modern. So as they gradually build an app, I think this reinforces their skills and gives them confidence. This is what I do.
Nice.
So Yakov, what would you say is the adoption like overall in Java for Angular? Does it seem like Angular is likely the most popular front-end framework being used in the Java world, or is there still a lot of hodgepodge of older stuff?
I can comment on this, of course, but I will give you a couple of different answers. The first answer is: are we talking about enterprises or we are talking about startups? The thing is, you probably have heard that some people like to compare Angular and React. And even though it's apples to oranges, people still do this. And you can find a bunch of articles online titled something like this: Why I switched from Angular to React. And next day you find why I switched from React to Angular. And everybody has their reasons. Next, I'm talking about United States, geographical. If you are from the West Coast, where lots of startups are, most likely React is most popular. In the enterprise world, on the East Coast, financial companies, telecommunication, entertainment industry, insurance, this is where Angular rules. And the reason is pretty simple. If you will put yourself in the shoes of a development manager, Angular is a lot safer and it carries less risk. And the reason is that Angular has everything that is required for developing an app. It has obviously the way to render, it has components, it has services, it has routing, dependency injection, all build tools, nice debugging, everything is there. Good UI libraries. And let's say I have a senior developer in our team, and this developer decides to leave. How can I replace this guy? I can replace it pretty easily by finding another senior developer who knows Angular. That's a requirement. The situation is not the same with React, even though it's getting better, but React is just a library for rendering UI. There are some other libraries now which can do other things, but still, a senior developer, a lead on the project, should pick up a bunch of different libraries and tools a la carte, sort of. And if this guy decides to leave, then it's not that easy to replace this guy, because I need to find somebody who knows specific set of libraries that was selected by in this project, in this app. So it's not that easy. So on the West Coast, in the Silicon Valley, obviously startups hire great developers, and there are small teams. And for those developers, picking the library is irrelevant. They can create apps in JavaScript. But on the enterprise world, it's a different story. In many cases, team leads don't even get to choose who will work on these projects. People come and people go. There are people around the world and so on. So Angular, in my opinion, has less requirements for the skill level to produce an app comparing to React.
So I'm with you, but when I argue this point, people like my friends from React or my friends from other frameworks tells me that, when you say a senior developer, so a senior JavaScript developer, let's say, needs to know how to get into, a project with lots of libraries and figure his or her way in the project, right? So that's what makes them senior, that they have the experience to read the source code or to dive into stuff and all that. And you touched on it on the end of the answer, where you said that you need less. I think what you said is you need to be less skillful in all of the ecosystem in order to get into a running project, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what do you think about like the senior, because you started by saying senior developer, and I'm just wondering like what your take on that? Like, does a senior developer, in your perspective, needs to know everything, or why is they consider senior?
Because they know CSS, Shai. I already mentioned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one reason. No, actually, senior developer is a person who has background in software industry and know how things work together. The only thing there is that with Angular helps tremendously. Angular gives you everything that you need. You don't need to go around trying to find which library is a good fit for this or for that. So learning Angular is good enough for a senior developer to start working on projects and deliver complex projects. I can tell you the other story from the real world development. When you see blogs or books or tutorials on Angular, typically the assumption is that you have a greenfield situation. Let me start developing an Angular project. And you start from scratch, you do ng new, and everything goes. This is not a thing that happens in the real world. In the real world, over the last 15, 20 years, people developed web app front end, and these apps are in production. They have users, they have demands, new requirements come in to make some improvements or maybe some bug fixes. You cannot just come over and say, you know what, Angular is the greatest thing in the world, or React for that matter, and let's rewrite everything. So you have to live in the environment with existing tools and systems. It was easier, by the way, in case of AngularJS. AngularJS could run along with other frameworks or without frameworks. But it's not that easy with Angular. So the other problem that I see people face in the real world is the problem that is caused by multiple different frameworks and libraries that were introduced into a project over the years. Any app, any large app that is in production today was developed over the years, typically 5, 6, 7 years. And over these years, new libraries and technologies were introduced. And I can tell you, recently, I was working on a project that was written in JavaScript, of course. And then it had AngularJS, not Angular, but AngularJS. Then all of a sudden, I see there is a piece written in React. Then they had different templating engine like Mustache, for example, on the front end. And there was the other one from the Java side, Thyme Leaf. So some UI was generated over there. And the biggest problem in this mixing tooling and different approaches is state management. That's the biggest one. When I looked at a certain module of that app, I see that it's written in React. I asked the manager why it is written in React if everything is not. If everything else. He said, we had a senior developer who said that React is great, and he introduced it to us, and we created this piece in React. Great. Next, requirement comes in, and the user goes through multiple steps in this app. There is a certain workflow, and all of a sudden they say, you know what? The user was working in this module and made some selections on the UI, and now he needs to go to a different module. And we want to remember everything that was selected in module A when the user will go to module B. Great. But when you start looking at module B, which was written in React, and state management was done in a certain way in React, and when you look at how you save state in the Angular, for example, JS section, we use all these root scopes and different scopes and controllers, and in there you use state. In some cases, people were passing state over from place to place by using URL parameters attaching to the URL. In some cases, they were using local storage, saving on the browser. So dealing with states become one of the big problems when you have a mix of different toolings. So if somebody will ask me for an advice, I want to tell you, you guys need to decide what are you going to do with the state management. If you can come up. Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to master Angular? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day intense workshop class for individuals or teams. They cover Angular 4 and 2 and focus on the skills and knowledge you need for complex, data-rich applications. They also still offer AngularJS for teams supporting older projects. Bring them to your site or send developers to them in St. Louis, San Francisco, New York, DC, and other cities, and online at angularbootcamp.com.
Another problem I see, and I have a question about the state management from your perspective, but just before that, another problem that I see with like choosing lots of different libraries is that once you get a certain point, like once you have the experience of going through updating one library and having it break with the rest because it's not compatible with the API of the core thing. And once you go that route a couple of times, you get tired of keeping like all the balls up in the air and all the juggling. And you actually something like Angular, which covers for the compatibility problem with all the different pieces working together and well tested on every version, it becomes like something very useful for you if you want to keep up to date with the latest features and not deal with all the oh, well, man, this community library, open source library, is not there yet, and I now need to issue a PR or switch, or I don't know, just hack my way or fork it, or and I have like 17 of those, and now I need to keep track. So for the core parts, at least, I think having one team that is responsible to verify that is a very, very, very useful thing to have, and a major benefit I see to Angular as an approach.
Right.
And my question for you is so you say you gave an example with AngularJS, but these days a popular state management solution is Redux, and I wonder what your thought about Redux as a state management solution, and do you see maybe an interoperability between React and GRX Angular apps? Maybe that could be a good solution to coexist. So what's your take?
You're touching a very sensible subject, right? Mm-hmm. I can tell you that I'll be running a workshop on GRX in 2 weeks or so. And this is one of these rare situations when I'll be teaching something that I understand, but I don't like.
Really? No, because I'm really curious about that. Why you don't like and why you are teaching it if you don't like it.
Well, I teach it because it is in demand. I'm talking about NGRX, specifically about NGRX. That's why I'm teaching it. And I will do a good job, because I will explain it well, how it works, even though it is a complex thing to understand. But in my opinion, it's over-engineered. But let's go a step back. You started asking about Redux first. Redux is a simple thing. It's a unidirectional flow. State is in one place. Reducer updates the state, and the UI subscribes to the states. When NGRX was created, NGRX was created specifically for Angular, and the creators of NGRX obviously wanted to use the fact that Angular comes with RxJS, with reactive extension library for reactive programming, observables, and all these operators and all this fun. And so basically they married simple Redux with not so simple RxJS, and they produced a complex child, so to speak, of this marriage, which is not easy to understand. And in my opinion, a good library is the one that allows you to write less code. NGRX is a library that will require you to write more code, a lot more code. Most of this code is a boilerplate code. It's to support life of NGRX itself. The code will become spread around different places, and it immediately raises the requirements for the level of a developer who will be reading your code. So that's why I think it's overcomplicated. It's probably a decent solution for large apps when people really care about having store objects, state object in one place. But the thing is that Angular has already everything that is needed for this. I can tell you, if you will create a service, and if you will declare this service at the module level, service becomes singleton, right?
Yes. And unless it's a shared module, but yeah.
All right. So it becomes singleton. If it is singleton, it's a central place where every component can go and put stuff or get stuff from there. So technically, it's a nice place for state. If you will put in this service a behavior subject that will be emitting data, and behavior subject is the one that not only is observable and observable. So you can push data, you can subscribe to data, but it also pushes the last value that was emitted to the stream to every new subscriber who comes in. So what does it mean for state management? It means that if you have a component with this service injected, with this singleton service injected, you can invoke an API on this service, like add product, for example, or find products. Inside of that product, you do next on the behavior subject, and whoever is subscribed now is getting the value. And this value that was pushed initially becomes state. You can push an object, and behavior subject remembers it. So let's say another subscriber comes in, or let's say we have a router situation. This component goes out of the picture. You click on the next link. Another component comes in and subscribes to the same service, gets injected and it subscribes to it. It'll get the previously pushed value, meaning the state of the app. So by using this singleton injectable service with behavior subject, many small or medium-sized apps can solve their state management problems with Angular features itself without the need to add any libraries.
And RxJS, yes.
RxJS is very minimal in that case. You just need to create a subject and need to subscribe to it.
Yeah, but you need to handle also unsubscriptions and stuff like that. It's not like just like one thing, because you need to be aware of when you route away from your component. Now you all of a sudden need to unsubscribe and all that stuff. Not necessarily. If you're not using a pipe async and stuff.
Exactly. If you are using async pipe, and why components subscribe to the service? Why? To render something, to show it on the UI. So a component is created, the service is injected in the constructor right away, and you subscribe right away. Actually, you don't subscribe. You invoke an API that returns observable. And on the UI, you have a sync pipe, so you don't need to worry about unsubscription. But now let's talk about GRX architecture, how things work over there. So you press the button, find me something. The user enters something on the UI. There are multiple players that will support this unidirectional flow. First of all, you're going to have store. Inside the store, you will have reducer, which is a function where you are expected to write a switch statement to handle different actions. Action is a command. Now you need to create an action class, which will have type and possibly payload. And for each action, you need to create classes. So if you have 5 actions, you have 5 classes right there. Now you need to have an enumeration of possible action types, of course. Then the action could be intercepted not only in reducer, but also in so-called effects class. A reducer is just to deal with state object. And it is great, actually, that there is a central place for the state object, and reducer just changes the state. But the thing is that reducer is a pure function that cannot reach out and try to get data from an environment or change data in the environment, meaning it cannot make HTTP requests, for example. It cannot write in the console. It cannot do lots of things. So who can? Now we have effects classes. Effects class is the one that also can listen to the actions. And the effect class will get service injected now. Now the service injected in the effect will pick up a certain action. It'll invoke the service. The service will return success and maybe some data or an error. Then effect needs to fire another action. And that action will go back to the reducer who needs to handle it. And the UI supposed to subscribe for the state. to get a different slice of the state, in the UI, you need to write so-called selectors. So the selector can give you a part of the state, a slice of the state object. So when you finish writing all that, you have tons of extra classes and functions to support this unidirectional workflow and a store as a single source of truth. I understand how it works. But actually, this will be the first class that I will teach. I'm curious to see how people will take it.
So, so I'm not a big Redux user, but I just like imagine that, or think that it also probably be the case with Redux, not just NGRX, in like a large scale project, because you also have this like lots of boilerplate code you need to add in order on every single move you want to make, right? Everything needs to be an action and stuff like that. And so from what I understand from your answer is that for your large scale apps, you're not using NGRX. Are you using a Redux style or just the services with the behavior subject?
I can tell you that we started with NGRX and then we switched back to services with behavior subjects. But I can also tell you that probably a couple of days ago, I noticed a really nice library called NGXS.
Oh, you stole my pick for today.
Sorry. All right, so I'll stop right there. But
no. Let's elaborate. It's
I don't know this library yet. I just read the documentation, but to me, it makes a lot more sense. Everything is built on annotations, less of a boilerplate, and it gives me a really nice feeling. So I'm planning to try it out. But
yeah, we actually had Austin, the creator, on one of the last episodes, like talking about. I think it was on that, or just one like a library before that, which led to this library NGXS. And yeah, to me, it also looks very clean, like much cleaner, and reduces lots of the boilerplate and a lot of decorators instead of. But it's still like the same. For everything, you need to create like an action and an effect and all that stuff. So I'm playing with this also these days and trying it out. But so you watch that, but you switch. You said that you switched to services and behavior subject.
For now, it fits the bill. I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to say that NGRX is bad. No. It is a good solution for large apps, for people who are not afraid of writing lots of additional code and of having code spread among different files. You will get used to it, of course, when you will learn it. But there are benefits, definitely. The benefits, having the state in the same place. The state is immutable. There are tools that allow you to go back in state if need be. And this could be definitely a solution for some apps. But I'm talking from my experience in our apps, for now, we are not using it that much. Besides, NGRX evolves as well. So I'm pretty sure that it'll become simpler over the upcoming months. Or maybe years.
Hopefully months. Okay, so you said a lot of good things about Angular. I wonder what, other than you mentioned Angular elements like widgets solutions, and which are cross I don't know frameworks or stuff, and maybe state management. What are like the weakest links you see when you teach about Angular? Like, where do people get confused, or or what do you experience with Angular that could be better?
It's not that could be better. For many people that I see in the classrooms, the concept of reactive programming are not as easy to understand immediately, because not many people were using it, even though RX libraries exist in different languages. For example, I was using RX Java, which is a really nice nice library, and but you have to get used to a little bit different way of thinking about the workflow in your app to appreciate what RxJS gives you. You have to look at the data flow, assuming that your data is your data stream goes through multiple small functions, and each function gives you a certain processing of one little thing, and then it goes to the next function, and then to the next function, as opposed to writing a class and say, I want to call this function, and now I want to call that function, I want to call this function. That's a bit different.
Yeah, declarative versus imperative.
Correct. In my classes, I use examples with beers in many occasions, because when people start explaining RxJS, they say, see that? I invoke interval and it will fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a great example, of course. But who needs something that will fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the real world? But when I start talking about beer, everybody understands this concept. And in particular, I show them a diagram of the beer process. You know how the beer flows through multiple stations, and every station will do a certain thing in the brewery process. For example, filter. If you want unfiltered beer, you will remove that filter station from this process. If you want it back, you will put it back. But the flow goes through algorithms of your app. And each algorithm is an operator technically, right? So it's an operator in RxJS that you apply to the stream. So each station in this beer brewing process is an operator, and the stream is a stream, and people get it. But still, it's a large piece to learn. So I'm not saying it's a weak point of Angular, not at all. But I do believe that people need to spend some time trying to get comfortable with RxJS concepts.
Nice. I like it's very clever, the example. If you like that example, you should watch our talk at NGConf this year. Me and Pete Bacon Darwin and Mike Brocky are going to do a talk about Switchmap, which is the most common used, but what we see is the most common source of confusion when using RxJS, and we also found I think an unusual example to teach that.
I'd love to see that presentation, because I also pay special attention to Switchmap. I think it's a super powerful operator in general.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, a person, I don't want to offend anyone, but a person who wrote documentation on Switchmap for RxJS, I have an opinion that this person had a goal to write something that nobody will ever understand. And I went through that and I didn't get it. And surprisingly, this was the case when the marble diagram helped me a lot, even though marble diagram for Switchmap is not the most easier to understand, but it was easier than documentation.
So we actually have a joke about that as well. So stay tuned.
All right.
It's also important to understand that Switchmap is still also complex. So you're talking about a real challenge to explain it clearly. You know, it's not the kind of thing somebody's going to sit down and I'm going to go explain this and then come up with it. Switchmap's it's complex.
Yeah.
No, but I can tell you how I explain it. I wrote a little app. I found a weather server, a server that everybody can go and get the weather in your city, weather being temperature, humidity, and some other things. They return JSON. So I wrote a little app where the users start typing the name of the city in the input field on the UI. This is an outer stream, so to speak, right? And I subscribe to this input using form API and value changes property, of course, which is an observable, right? So that's the first observable. And what do? I give it to the inner observable, which is a function that makes a HTTP request to this weather server, right? And then what I do, I emulate the slowness of the network. Slowness. And you go to the Chrome browser, and there is this option. Instead of online, you can select slow 3G. And I keep typing the name of the city, for example, New York. But because the network is very slow, the request went out, a response didn't come back yet, the inner observable, right? The user keeps typing the letters of the city, it's an outer observable. The outer observable emits the next part, or maybe the whole city name, and the Switchmap operator switches from one inner observable being unfinished request, HTTP request, to a newer one to send a request to the newly emitted city name. And then when I show people the network tab of the browser, they can clearly see how unfinished requests get abandoned. And this is when it clicks. I'm talking about Switchmap.
Yeah, it's it helps. It surely helps to see the actual code and to see the actual effect of the operator to get it. And so you said RX is one thing that people struggle with, which we see a lot, like as well. And what maybe other thing that you see?
Maybe testing of the UI is something that require special attention and some clearness in your mind. What exactly do you want to test? And what doesn't help is the tests that are generated initially by Angular CLI. Not all tests. Some helps. But for example, when you open up the first unit test for the app component, you will see that the first test is to check if the instance of app component class was successfully created.
Yeah.
Come on. What are the chances that instance will not be created? Why do you confuse people? Why do you give this example?
I smell a PR coming.
No, I will be not doing PR, but if you want to help people, give some real-world example. So this is something that is, I'd like to see more real-world example of testing, and especially it shouldn't be that difficult for Angular team, given the fact that Angular team is really well covered with tests. I remember when the framework was in alpha, there were no books at all, no blogs, nothing. So unit tests of Angular code helped me to understand what this specific feature is supposed to do. So Angular team is great about implementing unit tests, but I think they should somehow deliver a better message of what people should do in real-world apps in terms of testing.
Yeah.
That's the unit test. Now, protractor. Protractor is a big thing. I mean, it's under the hood. It has the huge machinery of all these Selenium drivers and servers and everything. So this is also something that need to be addressed better than it is now. How to properly use protractor. The other thing that is not obvious, and I think many people want to do this, how to split work in the enterprise environment between different teams. What if you have several apps that should be developed in your enterprise? Team A, Team B, and Team C, they will work on several apps. How this work should be organized? Well, we have a shell app that will somehow load each of these apps individually, or maybe it's better to create a shell app and modules, and all these modules will be loaded individually. Will be something that is shareable between these modules, how to identify that, what to do with versioning of the app. If you have these three groups and three apps, can a group A change something or make a patch in their code and deploy it separately from everybody else. So these are the things that are important for real-world development.
Did you see the Narwhal extensions?
I didn't see that, no. I know what you're talking about, but I did not see that.
Okay, so I wonder if you'll try it, what your thoughts will be. Maybe we could do another episode on enterprise division, because that's another issue.
But are you saying that these extensions are specifically geared toward problems that enterprises are facing?
Yeah, that's mainly their goal was to introduce like a common way to split the big app into smaller apps and how they communicate. So they actually wrote schematics that generate stuff in that way. So that will be an interesting thing for you guys to check and see if it works.
We'll check it out. Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're ready to end. We have been going for quite a while. I've had a lot of good discussion. So I think it's probably time to wrap up and move on to picks, don't you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. But before we do, of course, I also want to ask, is there anything else that should have been covered that we really didn't touch on?
I can actually make some other comments. And actually, maybe I'll do this in the picks section, right? So
yeah. All right. Go ahead, Shai.
Yeah, so maybe we could do it maybe we can invite you to another episode. We are planning to do another episode about testing. We just did like the last episode about TDD and such, and we're planning to do a episode about DOM testing versus class testing. So it will be interesting to see what you think about that as well. But just want to comment on that. But yeah, we can go to picks and wrap it up.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
Okay, Shai, well, you're up. You got your picks?
Oh, yeah. So one pick, was NGXS, which I didn't know is going to be mentioned. So I think it's a very interesting way to solve the boilerplate problem. And Austin is awesome and is doing a good job. So I urge you to check that out. And another...
This is Austin's thing, right?
Yeah, Austin McDaniels. And just search for NGXS and check it out and see what you think. And my other pick is a library of a very good friend of mine, Uri Shaked, who you probably know. And he created a library called TypeWiz, which he needed to migrate an older project which had no types whatsoever into TypeScript. So he created a tool that just scan your source files and automatically adds and interpolates your source code and automatically adds types into your source code. So that got like lots of waves and in the social media and many people. And he actually wrote, I think, 2 blog posts about how he created it and the internals and his process to create it and his lesson learned and all that stuff. So very cool if you need to add types to an untyped, maybe a JavaScript project, or maybe like that you want to turn into TypeScript, definitely check that out. So it's TypeWiz. And those are my picks.
Okay, awesome. So I have got 2 picks, one related to today's topic, and that is John, Papa, and Dan Moline have been working on something very similar to what Austin has done, but took a little bit different approach, and that's called NGRX Data. And I think that they're going to be presenting on it at NGConf, which will be interesting. But again, just an attempt to reduce the boilerplate of NGRX, and they've been pretty successful in what they've done. So that'll be my first pick. And my second pick is a book that I've been listening to, which is called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. And I'm a huge fan of these nonfiction books about human behavior and stuff like this. And it's a really interesting book. And I want to, it has kind of a categorization about success. The subtitle is actually pretty good. Why the surprising science behind why everything you know about success is mostly wrong. And I've been fascinated listening to this book. It talks about a lot of stuff that's very interesting and very useful. So I highly recommend it. Just a little bit into the book. I'm just a couple of hours, I think, into the book and still just absolutely fascinated by it. So that's my second and final pick.
What's the name?
Barking Up the Wrong Tree.
Okay.
Yakov, how about you?
I'll download this book. I have an account with Audible, so I have 5 or 6 credits that I didn't use, so I will do it right away.
Yeah, that's where I've been listening to it. Absolutely great book.
Okay, thanks. I want to, since we are talking about Angular for Java developers, I want to draw your attention to the project that we never mentioned in this podcast, but it's really a solid project. It's called JHipster. Have you ever discussed it on this podcast?
I don't remember. I don't think so, but I don't know.
But so I highly recommend you to invite people who develop this library and talk about it. It's a library which has 400 contributors. It has 10,000 stars on GitHub, and it generates for you an app which has Angular on the front end and Java Spring framework on the server side with different architectures. You can generate an app that is monolithic app where Java piece and Angular piece are together. You can generate an app which will create microservices. It'll create your UI right away. It'll give you stats on the use. I mean, it has discovery services. It has support of Docker. You name it. They have everything in there. So I highly recommend you to look at JHipster, and their site is just jhipster.tech, T-E-C-H. Actually, I can give you a link. I was using it for some time, and I can say that this is much more known or better known in the Java communities and for some reason in the Angular community. I'm surprised why that. And if you guys could invite people from JHipster, they'll be happy to explain how this works. I was doing also presentations in local user groups. It is really, really solid framework, and they keep actively working on it. As I said, 400 contributors. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that would be my pick. Also, if somebody is a Java developer who is listening to this podcast and never tried Angular, I would suggest you to Google on one of my talks called Angular for Java Developers. There are videos online. Last year alone, I did 2 talks, one in DevOps in California, and in November of this year, I did like a demo and explanation and like a mini workshop in Belgium, DevOps Belgium. So it may help you to see a big picture of how Angular works with Java. In that case, I'm using Spring framework for Java. In general, to be honest with you, I'm mainly speaking at Java conferences about Angular, which is a surprise, but this is how it works these days. Large conferences and people are interested.
Why will we see you at NGConf?
No. I have other plans.
Maybe next year.
Maybe.
Cool. So thank you so much, Yakov, for this episode and the wonderful answers and knowledge. And I think we should do more episodes. I'm sure we have still a lot to talk about. And good luck with the training and migrating lots of Java developers to Angular. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this. I really like your podcast, and I will keep listening, of course.
Sweet. Thanks.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.